Welcome to the Exploratory Podcast. What I'd love to hear from you, you're practicing now, but I'd love to hear a little bit around your background and if there are any shaping experiences, because you and I have actually worked together before. But yeah, just a little bit on your background and what brings you here to today.
Sure. So for the listeners, my name is Tyler Primavera. I'm a newly graduated doctor of veterinary medicine. And a little bit about myself, I'm initially from the island of Oahu in the state of Hawaii. So I come from a place where there's a lot of sun and there's a lot of cultural background. Hawaii, fun fact, is the only state that has an actual palace in it. None of the other 50 states have it because of the monarchy that was in Hawaii for a while. So fun little fact there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, I moved to Oregon for veterinary school. It was a complete culture shock, honestly. Being in a professional school environment, it's cold and gray and very different from Hawaii. And so we'll talk about wellness more later, but those were some of the darkest, literally dark, because it's like gray all the time for 9 months out of the year. Those are some of the darkest times in my professional and personal career. And then, I made it through vet school, and I'm currently a practicing veterinarian doing dog and cat medicine, and also fairly active on social media with a intention on making a difference outside of clinical practice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So, and for the listener, we've worked together before. We actually met, probably a year or two ago. And so it was a short project that we did, but I'm always captivated by captivated by inspiring people. And so something that stood out to me about you was your aspirations for business and linking that to vet med, but also you have this way about you that is like, you're not terribly risk averse. You're interested in throwing some stuff against the wall. You have been involved in multiple businesses in different capacities. Some of them are your own ideas that you've, launched. And that greater, or that maybe not the greater, but that undercurrent of wanting to make a difference for people and focusing on different ways to do that, understanding that there are different ways to do that. And we've talked a little bit about wellness or well-being. And like you said, whether it's through vet school, living in a different state, or potentially as a new grad, a lot of the content that you post online, LinkedIn specifically is where I see it often, is around these different parts of how we function as vet professionals.
Yeah, I appreciate those kind words, Renee. And I think, like you said, that the undercurrent of everything is making a difference. I find that, and you can probably agree with this, it's impossible to separate yourself from the clinical practicing medical side and the personal side and the business side. Like, it's all in one person. So I think, making a difference, it spans all of those categories pretty nicely.
Yeah, I appreciate. So what are you most excited about right now?
I've been a big fan of dancing lately. We've talked about this a little bit earlier. In vet school, I took some dance classes here and there, some drop-in things. But for roughly the past year, I've been taking dance classes. Like, sometimes it's 2 times a week, sometimes it's 5 times a week. I love it. And so non-professionally, that's just the thing I'm most excited about right now.
See, that's inspiring to me. That's really cool that you found like an active creative hobby. And so where are you at right now? Where are you located?
Sure, I'm in Salem, Oregon.
Oh, okay. So you're still in Oregon. Okay. For some reason I was thinking that you had left.
I will at some point. So my contract with the state of Hawaii is pretty cool. So I got in-state tuition for 4 years in exchange for being a vet back in Hawaii eventually. So really great scholarship. So I will go back to Hawaii at some point.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And what about on the business side of things?
Okay, business. I do enjoy business. So yeah, currently Vetspacito, and that's the name that we came up with. This is more than a business. I like to think of it as a movement started by my co-founder, who is a bilingual veterinarian. She's a first generation Latina American. And we've both realized that Spanish is just, it's so necessary to be able to communicate somehow in Spanish. And so some quick statistics, the USA is the second largest Spanish speaking country in the world. But when it comes to veterinary professionals that speak Spanish, there's roughly, less than 10% of vet professionals speak Spanish. And so there's this huge mismatch. And I have a little story about, the aha moment, so to speak. But basically right now we're really trying to bridge that language gap because we believe every pet deserves the best care possible. It doesn't matter what language their pet owners speak. So we're trying to bridge that gap now through our business.
I think that's awesome. Well, the stats are there. I know in my personal experience, we would use Google Translate. And that was obviously sometime after Google Translate was a thing. I remember being in North Carolina, so probably sometime after 2011. Prior to that, I don't recall what I did, but it sounds like too, it's not just a Google Translate. It's, you guys are somewhat packaging some of those common conversations that people are having with pet parents. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of how we're helping the veterinary community, so our first product is a video subscription that has these basic explainer videos. They're short, they're engaging, they're in English and Spanish. And it's not meant to replace any staff member. It's supposed to supplement them with, this is exactly how you explain heartworm prevention, spaying and neutering in Spanish to save you time and energy. And when you save time and energy, you're saving money. So that's our first product, our video subscription. We are having a free seminar on June 1st. I'll send you the link, where we're teaching veterinarians and veterinary professionals how to speak better Spanish, specifically veterinary Spanish. Because just because you're bilingual doesn't mean you can speak veterinary Spanish. Like that's a specific subset within Spanish. So our free webinar is going to cover, how to explain basic diseases, how to not offend people. Because quite honestly, I've been guilty of this, like saying something offensive unintentionally. And that's just, I got to do better than that.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's pretty cool. Happy to share the link. I think that's really cool for people to have those options. And it sounds like they might even be able to not just use them like where needed, but potentially have it like running in a waiting room. Would that be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty neat. Now, as a DVM, as a business owner, someone who's part of this startup, right? This is your guys' idea. You're an entrepreneur. You're bootstrapping potentially this startup. And what is that like for you? What does it feel like? And let's just start there. Like, what does that feel like?
Yeah. So I feel like, medically, I've gone through a lot of training, right? I've taken the science classes, the prereqs, went through vet school, went through clinics. In terms of medicine, I'm very well prepared. In terms of business, it's a lot of learning on the fly, as you probably know. there's a quote by Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, and he says starting a business is like jumping off a cliff and assembling an airplane on the way down. And so it's like 1,000 little things that add up. Like, hey, my lawyer charges me every time they answer an email. What? Or not all accountants are the same. Like, this accountant is trying to charge me every month, but really I only need to pay him at tax season. Like, just 1,000 little things that I'm dealing with, but it's beautiful, it's messy, and it's exciting. And if I get too focused on the little things that aren't working, then I can, kind of spiral downwards. So it's really been a test in being positive and being flexible and persevering.
Yeah. Really great things, that flexibility, and persevering through some of those challenges that can be really frustrating hiccups, right? But for some, it could even be like the make or breaks, right? If either you encounter something that's a little bit bigger than a hiccup,
Mhm.
or those hiccups, those thousands of little things get the best of you. So do you have any strategies of maintaining your well-being besides dating?
Yeah.
I think that's an important one, but
Strategies for well-being. And you're talking about life in general, not just in business.
just for Tyler in managing the ups and downs that come with your business or what shows up in the clinic. But being someone who, I think there's a lot of people within our community or in the vet community, I think really in our culture as a whole, that are either wanting to start a side hustle or who are already in it, right? They've left
Mhm.
off, they're in the middle of building that airplane, and they're like, how do I keep these things together? And then maybe on top of practicing, but like on top of social demands, family demands, just personal uh, fortitude, you know?
So I guess to use an analogy, it's like dancing. So in dance, there's a lead and there's a follow. And there's really a give and take. It's not dancing if the leader just does everything. It's up to the follower to respond. And so, the term work-life balance, I think, is overused and perhaps not accurate. There's a term called work-life harmony, which I think is much more accurate because it implies a dynamic changing. It's not like, 5 days a week I spend 8 hours at the clinic, and then every day I spend 2 hours with my family and 1 hour eating or whatever. And so I really tried to let go of limiting beliefs. Like, I'm a perfectionist, and you probably are too. Many of us in VetMed are, but realizing, hey, like working with my coach, are my goals realistic? Oftentimes they're very ambitious, and honestly, half the time they're not realistic. So dialing back, like, instead of having a goal of having, selling whatever X amount of subscriptions, so that would be an external goal, focusing more on internal goals, like, hey, how am I growing through this? Like, this person just let me down or betrayed me, violated our contract. And that's good because this is making me stronger. So kind of doing a mental jujitsu of, shifting the leverage around. And I'd love to talk about jujitsu too, but digress.
Two sports. I like it. You mentioned that you've got a coach that you work with, and I think that's
Mhm.
cool, regardless of what their actual like area is, whether it's business or life or whatever. I think it's awesome that you're working with someone. Um,
Mhm.
I just heard a quote about um, it's not about like defining the roadmap. It's about who has the roadmap.
Mm.
Um, and so that's totally paraphrasing it, but I think by working with other people, and then of course, like what she's bringing out is how can we maintain that personal power while
Mhm.
still reaching or some of those external goals that you need, right? Some of those are valid external goals to have, and that need to be reached in order to go further. But the process of how we go through those things, and sometimes that's best experienced when you're working with someone, even if they don't have, let's say it's not a business coach, right? So like maybe they don't have your exact roadmap, but they have a roadmap, and they can help you lay your own roadmap. And I think that's something that's really important for people to understand, is that everyone's roadmap is different, um, no matter what you're trying to do. And so you have to take these things and you have to impress it upon yourself as you are creating whoever it is you want to be, so that you can experience the things that you want to experience.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think focusing on growth has really been helpful. So I know I can get into the mindset sometimes, looking on social media like, hey, look at this person with their business, or look at this person with all their likes and follows, but really focusing on my personal growth. Like, you know, this week I caught something on a patient that a month ago maybe I wouldn't have caught because I didn't develop that clinical skill. Or, just recently I did my first cystotomy and that was like really cool. And just focusing on like that went really well. And I would have been terrified to do that 6 months ago. So
Yeah,
really focusing on growth has helped me a lot.
that's really inspiring, because that focus on growth, and what you've pulled out of those moments, just being able to see that is like a little bit of a superpower, because it could have just flashed by. And if you weren't trained to focus on that growth, then you might have missed it, right?
Mhm,
And something else might have taken your focus, like the patient that maybe something did get missed on, or um,
mhm,
a situation that you didn't handle as your best self. I had mentioned earlier that I had just finished up a webinar. And so we understand now there's always been challenging scenarios in vet med. I don't think that was ever like in short supply, but we know that the landscape has changed a little bit. And so we have more difficult interactions sometimes. And so whether or not we're focusing on those, or whether or not we're focusing on potentially the growth that comes from those,
mhm,
can really be the game changer for a lot of people, to not just stop their suffering, like we want that, right? We want a better experience, but also to show up better, because it's not going to be the last time, right? It's not going to
mhm.
be the last cystotomy. It's not going to be the last tough conversation with a client, or with a teammate, or with a business thing like that you learn. You're going to
Mhm.
get disappointed again. You're going to learn something new. You might make a bad investment, maybe not a bad investment, but an investment that didn't pan out. Like we'll put it
Mhm.
that way, right? All sorts of different things. So to focus on the growth and like what that means, and potentially consciously deciding what that means, versus it automatically being assigned meaning before you before it ever hit like inside, like
Mhm.
that makes, like we
Yeah.
make a snap judgment of like, this is awful, or oh, this could be good,
Mhm.
you're like training your mind to say, okay, how do we want to perceive this? Like, how do we want to internally represent it in a way that supports me?
Right. And to add on to the growth thing, a basic analogy would be like lifting weights. It's sometimes painful, sometimes uncomfortable, but without that pain, without that stimulus, we can't grow. And so, like, I know, like myself, like sometimes I just want an easy, simple life where, all my patients are healthy and no one threatens to sue me. But like, I'm not going to grow unless I'm challenged. So I think that really helps to like look at these setbacks as setups for later success.
Yeah, I like that. What sort of challenges are you seeing in your clinical practice?
Well, from the client's perspective, especially in this economy, cost is definitely a major factor in veterinary care. I would love to see insurance, take off and have pets have more things that are covered, so pet owners don't have to choose between paying their rent and taking care of Fluffy. So from the client's perspective, that I think is a big problem that I've seen play out multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to decide where I want to go with that because I just got done talking about that. And I think, it's a really important thing to be talking about. That's one of those things, right? It's always been there, but somehow where we are right now, it seems like it's one of like the biggest thing, right? That clients especially are dealing with, and then the team is dealing with, and how we navigate that. And so I think that there are ways to navigate it or to help pet parents navigate that. It's probably a longer list. It's a longer than for this conversation, but just asking yourself, like, what do we have in place, right? What do we have in place? If you're an individual working at a clinic, to say, what do we have in place? When this person has a challenge, what are the steps? Take an opportunity to take inventory of what systems, policies, procedures, third party, like what things are present, and then to build that out, to develop that. Insurance, of course, is one of them, but there's a lot of different ways that I think between and the more robust options that you give clients, more likely that we're going to reach that shared success for a positive patient outcome. But working on our communication skills helps us get there, to really uncover, like in your case, is it a choice between rent and vet care? Because it's not then about the vet care. It's not about the price of the vet care. It's about the lack of security the person might have around their rent. Or maybe they just went through a divorce and that's why they can't pay their rent, or their dad just died, or, and so it's about something bigger. And I encourage people to take that listening or that learning-based communication style, because without it, we don't get to those real reasons. And so we're left thinking, well, we just have to lower our prices. But I think, even the lowest, like if you look at a store, like you can only go so low, right? And it doesn't necessarily solve anything. People still want it for nothing. And so, and probably on like a fun way, I might say, like, if we made it nothing, people would still have something to complain about.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and really, let's take that example. Let's go down this rabbit hole just for a second. I have seen people get stuff at the zero cost, and and they do. Not only do they complain about something, but potentially it's that client who you've bent over backwards for, and they still do something like objectively kind of absurd in behavior. Where, they're treating the staff or something with disrespect. And so it doesn't solve the problem, right? I've never had a client like have, their entire animal's care for their entire life be zero, but I've definitely seen patients get services at zero cost. And it doesn't always work out. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And so again, it's like we have to lean into other, tools that we can adopt and potentially like trade out in
Right.
a moment, like as you're trying to deal with some of these scenarios, where there's not a lot of time to figure out like what's my next move.
And there's interesting business psychology research that basically says when you give stuff away for free, people don't value it, right? And I think we can all relate to this. Like, oh, I got this free shirt. It's cool. If I paid $50 for the same shirt, I'm probably going to take care of it more. And I'm probably going to value it more because I sacrificed more to get it. So I think that's just interesting research how, making something free or less expensive doesn't always solve the problem. It might make it worse.
Yeah, because they don't have skin in the game. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
We just have to find new ways to communicate that value to our clients, and our pet parents, and look for alternatives if we reveal that, it really is, about the cost. What's one of the highlights of practicing where you are at?
Hmm. So different things. Some of the benefits of being in general practice is, from the beginning to the end, all the years in between, I really get to see the whole picture instead of just focusing on one organ or one event. So I love hearing it when patients get better. To me, the follow-up on a patient is like reading a book. Like that's where, the plot twist happens and, the ups and downs. And to me, that's much more interesting to see how Fluffy did over 6 months or, versus, oh, this one patient, this, one day or one blood work entry. To me, the bigger picture is much more interesting.
Yeah, that's always been something I've enjoyed to watch the kids grow up. And sometimes it's I probably get overly attached. When I moved from Michigan, there were kids. I had spent 11 years at my first clinic, so there were kids that I was equally attached to that were not my own kids.
Uh-huh.
you know, what are you most excited about for the future?
Not just veterinary medicine in particular, but the future in general.
Yeah, like anything that's meaningful to you.
So I have a lot.
Give us a list.
Okay. I guess the underlying theme of it all would be not just challenging the status quo, but really, to use the same phrase again, making a difference. So in terms of clinically, we're going to have a lot better technology, but technology is good, but it's only as good as the human that's using it. So I think in terms of veterinary practice, we're going to get a lot better. And I think we've seen multiple instances of this where, doing diversity, equity, inclusion training, focusing on wellness, like your company does, focusing on the whole picture. Currently, millennials, I believe, make up the majority of the workforce. And myself being a millennial, like we're not going to settle for what has been done for the past 40 years. I think we're going to really change things up professionally. So that's the clinical realm. In terms of the business realm, there is going to be a increased interest in what we call social entrepreneurship. So profits are good, but we want to make profits that are sustainable and that actually helps people and makes the earth a better place to live. So I think I'm a really big picture guy. Like those are some of the big picture things that I think is really exciting to see things change for the better as we get, these younger people growing up and really taking their dreams to the next level.
I like it. Do you think that the big picture helps you with your own like mental health and well-being, like being able to sort of pull out of transitory states and get back to that like bird's eye view?
Yeah, I think so. To use a basic analogy of, the weather. Right now it's May, it's beautiful in most places in the northern hemisphere, and it's springtime. And growing up in Hawaii, I never really appreciated springtime because it's sunny all the time. It's sunny, maybe it's rainy. But moving to Oregon, springtime was just it had a whole new meaning to me after spending the past 5 or 6 months in cold and darkness, seeing those little blades of green grass pop up and the orchids and daisies just start to emerge. I don't know, it's a powerful experience, just really appreciating the cyclical nature of life. Something bad happens, which means something good happens, and vice versa. So, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's
Yeah, I think it's drawing on those bigger experiences and looking for those bigger patterns, which sometimes that is a big relief to me too when I'm able to identify it. Um, that's the trick, is being able to identify it, or
right.
to identify it. Knowing that, like, okay, you're just in that the ebb, right, where it's tough. And you can't force it into flow.
Right.
Definitely soften some things up and do certain practices or tap into certain tools that can sort of allow you to get back into flow, but you can't
Right.
force yourself back into flow or back into that good. And I think sharpening your awareness to where you can recognize contrast,
Hmm.
like you kind of described, of this is not good, this is the not where I want to be at, but this is an opportunity for me to grow, this is an opportunity for me to have a setup instead of a setback, and to do
Hmm.
it like sooner rather than later, right? I think we start with somewhat of a reflection, like you can kind of look back on old experiences and be like, oh yeah, that would have been a really good time. But if we sharpen that awareness, then you can start to get that in the moments, and you don't
Hmm.
have to spend days and weeks in tough spots.
Yeah, yeah. Have you watched or consumed content from David Goggins before?
Goggins sounds familiar. The last name or the first name doesn't, but I could be wrong. Tell me more.
Okay.
Like what?
Yeah, yeah. So he's a Navy SEAL motivational speaker. I think he has a world record for amount of consecutive pull-ups in like a 24-hour span.
Okay. I have maybe not from him, but maybe from other people who have talked about it.
Right.
Yes.
But he talks about this concept of the cookie jar. So his example was, when he's running what would he do? Running 100 miles in like the desert. It's crazy. His cookie jar was remembering all the his previous experiences that he got through, like remembering, hey, he used to be close to 300 pounds and he got through that. He used to be terrified of being authentic around people and would lie to people, and he got through that. So I've been trying to work on my cookie jar more, like remembering, hey, I used to absolutely hate, despise, and fear social media. Like, I'm a honest to goodness introvert. Like, it disgusted me at first, like to like try to like get the word out about marketing or branding myself. And with a lot of work and a lot of help, like here I am being very active on social media and being a lot more authentic publicly. So
Yeah.
just those little reminders of how like I've grown, and the tough times previously that I've gotten through.
Yeah. Um, when you said that, it reminded me, I know exactly who he is now. And I'm still stand by my statement of I don't watch his particular content, but I've seen him
Mhm.
people's. Um, and there's reasoning behind that, but we won't go there. But I love that exercise. Something that I've talked about in my presentations and on Get Motivated University is creating files for certain things. whether it's like paper files or whether it's in your phone, an email label, something that someone gives you, like whatever it is, but using these different files to fuel you when you're in those valleys.
Right.
That right there, what you talked about, I think that's a really cool exercise that we can leave with the people, because everyone doesn't have that. Whether it's stored up in their brain, mind, or whether it's stored somewhere paper, but like list that out. Better yet, if it is someplace that you can tap into when you need it, like a Google Doc. Because when you are in those tough places, you will forget how awesome you are. And then when you look at that, you're like, oh man, I did go through vet school. I did create an LLC. I did, make my first sale. I did serve someone. I did help them. I did whatever it is. Go through a divorce, buy a house, transform your well-being, go for that run, buy a new pair of shoes, like whatever it is. But those are the things I would encourage people to like sit down, write out, as David says, your cookie jar. What are the things that I have accomplished? And this even comes up when you do work in like self-love, like prompts for self-love, is recognizing some of these things. And if you're starting at like ground zero, and even if you're not, that is sometimes hard. It's sometimes hard, especially if you are just sitting there, to figure out what those things are. But if you start the exercise and kind of go back to it, I'm sure that you will think of things over the next 3 weeks, right? And then you kind of prime the pump so that when you do go through something that's really tough, you're like, I'm adding that to my list in big bold letters because I just crushed it. Crushed it, because you're not always going to have a cheerleader in your corner. And so you kind of have to be your own cheerleader.
Yeah, and to, bring up a psychology correlation, the reticular activating system. You ask better questions, you see better results. So there's this, and I'm a big fan of psychology. So there's this experiment with like, in your day-to-day for the next few days, ask yourself, where are the heart-shaped images? What things look like a heart every day? And you'll be surprised, like it seems like 100 new heart-shaped images appeared. They're already there, but now you're looking for them.
That's so funny. I use blue circles and yellow diamonds in my pre. That's so funny. Or maybe it's triangles, yellow triangles and blue circles. But yeah, it totally is. It's so true. So true. And you'll just retrain your neural pathways to become more effortless at trying to find those things. But it's a really cool eye opener when you see those. So I love it. So where can people find more of you? What social media platforms do you have a presence on?
Sure. So LinkedIn, pretty active there. Tyler Primavera. TikTok and Instagram, I'm less active on those, at Dr. Primavet, DrPrimavet. My company is called Vetspacito, Vetspacito. And I've been doing some business talks at the VBMAs, at different vet schools, and working on doing that some more in dancing. So I have some dancing videos on Instagram and TikTok, so check those out.
Nice. Nice. We'll share those links in the show notes as well. So we'll have those like easily accessible for you guys. I'll have to talk about jiu-jitsu like another time. We go though. Are you like a practitioner? Do you have a level that you've achieved?
No, I'm a white belt. I started jiu-jitsu in vet school. I did it for about 1.5 years. And then I dumped jujitsu to focus on dancing. Like it was a hard choice. It was really hard. But there's actually some interesting carryover where learning martial arts will help with balance and dancing.
Yeah. What made you make the shift? What was like the deciding factor?
Mm, Initially, I wanted to stick around to get my blue belt, but towards the end, I noticed that we're just doing the same moves over and over to perform for the test. And for me, I'm more practical. Like I can, knock on wood, defend myself in most situations after training for a year and a half. And I felt that my self-defense skills were adequate and that having a belt, it was impressive, but not necessary if I knew how to defend myself.
I love that. I love that a lot. And I think that translates over to business as well, because you'll find certain mile markers can be like incentives, but practicality is what makes like Dr. Holly and I tick more so than like an award or something. So I really like that, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. Now tell me, like with the dance then, because dance then there's not really an end. It's right. I mean, all of your skills would just be building upon better skills and
Yeah, I guess there's no real objective. It would be cool to get really good and compete at some point, but that's down the road.
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and connecting with the listeners of Get Motivated and our community, our well-being, like-minded move. I love our people, our tribe, and now they get to have a little piece of you. And I'm certain that some of them will become your tribe members as well as you grow in the industry and business and, just in life. So I love watching you grow. It's an inspiration. And I'm sure that you're inspiring others as well to do their, their work, but also live their passions.
And maybe, your fans, your tribe will be like, hey, get motivated. We want like dancing in your seminars, so you should include that. I had a little dance party at Washington State Vet School. Gave a business talk and had a little dancing fun afterwards, and I'm gonna do the same at Oregon.
I like it. I'm sure the students are enjoying it, and what a fun way to like bring home some of the, the camaraderie that comes with these events where, we're creating this connectiveness in vet med.
Yeah, vet med needs more wellness, and I think vet med also needs more dancing too.
All right, Tyler. Well, thank you so much.